In the opening chapter of Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman observes, as I write, Neil, the President of the United States is a former Hollywood movie actor. He wasn't writing about Donald Trump in 2016. He was writing in 1985 about Ronald Reagan. Thus began an epic Jeremiad about the then recent fad of politicians, scientists, and academics sitting for interviews on late-night TV shows and hosting Saturday Night Live.
I have really nothing better to do.
It's almost comical to read that today because I can hardly imagine a world where that sort of thing doesn't happen. He writes this: our politics, religion, news, athletics, education, and commerce have been transformed into congenial adjuncts of show business, largely without protest or even much popular notice. In Neil Postman's day, this meant that America was developing television brain, a way of thinking about the world mediated by televisual communication. Today, that idea sounds quaint. We hardly talk about watching TV. Instead, we talk about streaming. Our entertainment comes to us largely through AI-generated feeds, Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube videos, and they all come on smartphones, not by human-generated broadcast schedules or on cathode ray TVs. We don't have television brain today. We have internet brain. If Postman were alive today, he no doubt would have concluded that we've descended into a vast triviality. A world where information is contextless, where information is jointless, it's pell-mell. A world with short bursts of useless content designed for a culture with a deficit of attention. A world that creates a growing inability to think well, to reason thoroughly, and to sift through important matters and know the difference between those and wasteful distraction. But I'm getting ahead of myself because before making such a claim, one must first prove that the mediums of our communication actually shape how we think and what we communicate. Let me put this into a question. Does using the internet cause irreparable brain damage, what I'm calling internet brain? Everyone knows how irritating it is when someone sends a message in a text that should be on a phone call, or when someone calls a meeting that could have been in an email. We all intuit that different mediums naturally mediate certain kinds of conversations better than others. What we rarely consider is that when we read, watch, or listen to online content, the same reality applies. In the words of Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. I know that old aphorism is old hat, but Postman presses that insight further. He points out that the manner in which we're obliged to conduct our conversations, whether that's online or on television, well, that medium will have the strongest possible influence on what kind of ideas we can conveniently express through the medium. And what ideas are convenient to express, well, those inevitably become the important content of a culture. It's not merely that the medium shapes the message, it's that a culture's preferred medium makes certain messages possible and other messages impossible. Whatever medium of communication predominates a culture, whether that's words or pictures or videos or social media feeds, whatever medium that is, it has a way of downvoting information that it can't accommodate and communicate well, has a way of upvoting information that it makes convenient. If you're describing a scandal in an institution, a long-form medium such as a report based on interviews and findings, well, those kinds of things can offer nuance and careful insights, and they can offer thoughtful recommendations about how victims might be helped and future scandals might be prevented. But when you transpose that scandal into a 60-second TikTok video, a thread on X, or a headline, or an article, or a podcast, well, the description of the scandal changes, not merely because of its length, but because of its goals. Most of these mediums are designed to entertain and seize bursts of audience attention. Moreover, they often include images embedded into links and feeds that make other forms of communication convenient. Let me give one recent example. After Matt Chandler voluntarily stepped aside from ministry, after sharing with his elders that he'd had a careless and unwise direct message relationship with a woman on Instagram, a different media org, Christianity Today, posted an article with an ominous headline: Matt Chandler steps aside after inappropriate online relationship. This was the image they posted with the article. He's making an almost childish oopsie face. It would be comical if the entire situation wasn't so fraught. It's not just fraught for Chandler, it's fraught for the woman that he was DMing, it's fraught for the village church itself. With a combination of a sparse headline and a bizarre picture, they communicated that Chandler had done something nefarious and bad and that he thought it was a oopsie situation. The fact that this was the second most read article of 2022 in Christianity Today underlines that it was inevitably shared on social media feeds, where at the time people would only see the image and they would only see the headline, and that would just give them the opportunity to respond to image and headline rather than understanding the full context. You see, the medium is the message. And the media makes certain messages more convenient. And whatever messages are the most convenient and pervasive, well, that shapes a culture's discourse. And that thereby shapes how we think, not just about a single message, but about everything. That is internet brain. It's at once reactive and amused, serious and ill-informed, expert and amateur. Internet brain is characterized by shallowness. We know something about everything and yet know nothing about anything. We're a mile wide, an inch deep, as they say. But of equal importance is the internet brain's fixation on entertainment. What we give our shallow attention to is what amuses us, evokes wrath, stimulates lust, and stirs frivolity. It's the scrolling brain, the one that phase shifts from one contextless, disjointed piece of information to the next. But it does it with ease. Internet brain finds itself seized by paralysis when it attempts to slow down, dig deep, and think long thoughts. Speaking personally, I can recognize that my own thinking and reading habits are not what they were just 10 years ago. And all of this has me thinking, what if we all need to incorporate practices rooted in the second commandment that counteract internet brain? While Postman credits McLuhan with popularizing the idea that medium and message are connected, he suggests that the idea has a much more ancient pedigree. He goes back to the Bible and points out that on a desert mountain in the Sinai Peninsula, Moses inscribed a law from God, and this law transformed a community's worship from being image-based, because they worshipped idols, to being word-based. Here's the law. You shall have no other gods before me. And catch this part, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. This single command shifted the locus of Israel's worship from image to word. They would become a people of the text. They become a people who encountered God through the public reading of words, not by bowing down to images. The words, which were yet to be written of the prophets, the kings, and the wise men, would shape their minds, their hearts, their habits, the habits of Jews and later Christians. And they shaped not just our worldview or our conception of the common good, but they affected the formation of our character. They affected how we interacted with the world of ideas and information around us. So while the command against images strikes us today as prosaic, even banal, because no one bows down to images anymore, I think it still has a pressing relevance today. Postman writes, "It is a strange injunction to include as part of an ethical system unless its author assumed a connection between forms of human communication and the quality of a culture. We may hazard a guess that a people who are being asked to embrace an abstract, universal deity would be rendered unfit to do so by the habit of drawing pictures, or making statues, or depicting their ideas in any concrete iconographic forms. The God of the Jews was to exist in the Word and through the Word, an unprecedented conception requiring the highest order of abstract thinking. Iconography thus became blasphemy, so that a new kind of God could enter a culture. People like ourselves who are in the process of converting their culture from word-centered to image-centered might profit by reflecting on this mosaic injunction. I think it's striking that Jesus, who Paul called the image of God on multiple occasions, he is still inextricably connected to the typographic world. He's not just the image of God. You see, John calls him the Word. And while Jesus never wrote any words, at least words that we still have, his followers did so, and they did so in the tradition of the Hebrew prophets and sages. We cannot deny that a word-based culture, whether it be through the act of reading or having someone read to you, is inherently part of the kingdom structure from the beginning. God's people are people of words. They're people who read, they're people who are read to. And for a long time, this happened through the reading of the word. It was based in a oral culture. But after the printing press, this word-based culture, it continued through the word-based culture of typography. But now that we're moving backwards towards an image-centered culture of symbology, entertainment, and AI-curated content, things are changing. There's still a ghost in this audio-visual social media machine, and that ghost is not the Holy One. The only resistance I can imagine is precisely the form of resistance that the Hebrews deployed themselves. They did not totally remove symbology from their worship. The tabernacle was a pictographic Garden of Eden. There were trees and angels and animals and even this big cosmic sea on it. And so I can't go all the way with Postman. Visual modes of expression are valuable. They're even a valuable part of our worship and our life together. But what would it look like if Christians re-centered themselves on words? Not just the Word of God, but words in general. For me, this looks like a ritual of putting all screens away for a prolonged period while I read. I simply cannot, at least this is the case for me, I cannot comprehend a page with a phone in my pocket. The only way to retain some semblance of a typographic mind is by limiting how much entertainment we consume. how many images we intake, how much disjointed, disconnected, and trivial information we consume. Maybe it's too late. As the Borg said in Star Trek, resistance is futile. But is it?